Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the For the Future podcast. This week I have a conversation with Robert Walker, the events director for many events related to electric vehicles and solar energy, such as the well-known Sasol Solar Challenge. And in our conversation, we speak about his career, his journey in running the Sasol Solar Challenge, and the future of electric vehicles and solar energy in Africa in general. I really love this conversation and I hope you guys do as well. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so thank you so much again, Robert, for taking the time to come onto my show and chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure, Bukanyo. Thank you very much for having me.
So, my very first question for you is could you just explain to the audience who you are and what is your story?
So my name is Rob Walker. I am the event director for the Sasol Solar Challenge. My story is the short version. I grew up in and around eventing. I grew up in a family where my father ran a large eventing infrastructure company. So I've been building most and any types of events, from marquees to exhibitions to conferences to agricultural shows and pretty much everything in between since I care to remember. Moved into the organizing side of events about 15 years ago now. And found my way into or around the Sasol Solar Challenge in about 2016. It came across my radar. Um, as an event I was interested in, more from an organizing point of view, just to understand what the organizers were doing, because it was something that was quite different. And then in 2000 and end of 2017, the then owner, a gentleman by the name who founded it, Winston Jordan, he contacted us at the end of 2017 and said, look, he would like to bring us on board to organize and run it on his behalf for 2018. So we did that, and kind of people say that the bug of solar cars, it bites and it bites hard. Yeah, and a bit hard. And I saw what the potential was for this thing. And in early 2019, Winston and I agreed to, he agreed to sell the event to me, which I'm internally grateful that he put the trust in the thing that he had founded with us. And I think him and I both just saw the opportunity that he had established it, founded it, grew it. But I was young, energetic, had a lot of new ideas. Basically took it forward from there. COVID obviously had a huge impact on us in 2020. We
Yeah.
weren't able to run the event for the first time in its now nearly 14-year history. So that was a big setback. But we rebounded well now in 2022, and I think we're in a stronger position than we probably ever have been in terms of the success, the reputation, the experience. So yeah, in a nutshell, it's basically moved me and my businesses into the EV space, talking about electric vehicles, talking about renewable energy. We've done mass participation events before for different sports, but this has really become kind of our focus now, for the medium and long term future of myself and my business.
Wow, that's really cool, and it's really interesting to hear how you sort of went from events to finding this field that was really intriguing to you and how it helped your businesses.
Sure. No, it was look. It's a very interesting field. It's one. I mean, I'm probably one of the few people in the space who stands out. I'm not an engineer. Most of the people are engineers, or they're electrical experts, or they're energy experts. I've become very knowledgeable through just an interest in what it is, and obviously,
Mm.
working with the best in the industry, you do become knowledgeable. But I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. But what I do believe I'm pretty good at is putting on really good experiences for people. And I think that speaks true. If you speak to people who participated in last year's challenge, all of them will say, "Oh, the experience, the experience, the experience," and that's what we're here to do.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, no, that's cool, and that definitely makes sense. So, what you mentioned earlier that you kind of got bitten by the bug when you first came across the solar challenge. So, what about it kind of interested you, and like what drew you into the solar space, the renewable space, and that kind of area?
Look, I mean, I've always been a bit of an environmental person. I mean, I enjoy the environment. I would always say I was very conscious of what's going on around me. It was for me, it was phenomenal. You had these young minds who don't believe anything's impossible. Literally, they don't believe anything's impossible. Building these phenomenal cars that are running on the power of the sun, and they're covering huge distances. I mean, our top teams are covering more than 4,500 kilometers. It's is massive distances, and just getting to understand that this is this is not saying that these students woke up 6 weeks ago and said, "Oh, I'm going to build a solar car." This is a combination of, for some of them, it's a combination of almost 2 years worth of work, to come to South Africa, to journey across, our beautiful country, and I think what really, kind of hooked me was to see the impact that we had on people. And I've done a lot of, as I said, I've done a lot of events, and yeah, we make an impact. People enjoy them, they have a good time, good concert, but this is real. This is not. This is not like an impact where it's like, oh, that's a cool memory. This is we are changing lives. Like and I'm so blessed. We have a very benevolent sponsor in Sasol. We walk into the offices and we say, we're going to do this. We're going to charge across the countryside in solar cars, and they go, okay. Let's do it, and they back us. They just back us to the hilt. We've earned their trust, but we have an understanding is that we're on a mission to change lives through STEM.
Yeah.
What really, I suppose, if you say the one moment that it bit me, I can tell you exactly. If I could close my eyes and I could replay it, and I hope that I can replay it in my mind until I'm 90 years old one day. But we were in a town in the Eastern Cape called Corredo. I guarantee you, if you Google Corredo on Google Maps, it'll struggle to find it. Small town, and it was our third last day in 2018. Now, bear in mind, at this point in time, I didn't have ownership of the event. I was just a service provider. I organized. I was, I remember we arrived, and by that point, we had quite a long 10 days up to that point. We had some really interesting weather coming out of Klerksdorp. We had interesting interactions with some of our men and ladies in blue. It had been a fun event. Let's put it that way. From an event organizer point of view, if you ever say to an event organizer they had fun, they know it's not fun. I remember arriving in Corredo, and I was absolutely shattered. I was so tired, and I thought, I don't know if I could do this. I mean, this is now the Solar Challenge. To give context, for an event organizer, it's 14 days, and you're switched on 24/7. It does not stop. I mean, I can tell you stories of being woken up at 1 o'clock in the morning. You are on 24/7. It is the hardest thing I've ever done from an organizing point of view. But I remember, and we arrived in Corredo, and we had the team from Japan, from the University of Tokai. They're Archer, great team. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make it to South Africa last year with still COVID restrictions in some of the Asian countries. I'm really hopeful they're going to be here in 2024. I've chatted to their team manager already. And the teams, then, that we didn't mandate the teams, they didn't have to engage with the communities. We strongly encouraged it. Back in 2018, we didn't mandate. We've changed that now, but they didn't have to. And they got to the control stop, which is the middle point of the day, and that's where the teams stop, and then they start doing their loops to get their extra kilometers. So for anyone asking, how does a car do 4,500 Ks from here to Cape Town? Really easy. There's a set minimum stage, control stop, and then you do extra loops to get extra Ks. Right, so a little left turn there. But so I arrive in Corredo, everything's running quite smoothly, thank goodness. The police are helping us out. We've closed off the roads. We've got a couple of schools out to come checking us out. Everything's going quite nicely. And this young lady, I think she must have been, at the time, she must have been 16. Nice, lovely young lady. Over Corredo, it's an agricultural, rural Eastern Cape, so it's Afrikaans. It's as Afrikaans as you can get. And this lovely, she was a coloured young girl, and she went up to the guys from Tokai, and she was totally fascinated with what was going on. They opened the car up, and the car had to be there for a mandated 30 minutes. And she spoke to this young man from Tokai from Japan, and I know he did not speak English, was not his first language. Put it this way.
Mm.
So you had a gentleman who had broken English kind of understanding, speaking to a lady who had very broken English because her first language was Afrikaans, and then
Yeah.
followed by probably Xhosa, or our English was down the order.
Mm.
But the language that they both understood was the passion and love for engineering, and they
Wow.
could speak to each other through this language. And I remember watching, and I was fascinated. I won't. I probably had like 3 coffees in a half an hour that day because I had to keep going.
Mm.
But I remember having a cup of coffee, watching these two talk, and when that young girl, they said to her, "Look, we're really sorry. We have to go now. The cars need to leave." And, "No, no, fine." Closed up, and when she looked up and she looked at me, you could see, like, it was like the scales had been lifted from her eyes, and she
Mm.
realized there was a different world out there. The world wasn't, small, working on a farm in Korea. If she stuck with engineering, there was an opportunity for her to go to Japan and build a solar car with the kids from, Japan, or
Mm.
talk to the guys from Netherlands or Stanford University in the US. And I remember she walking up to myself and my team, and she spoke to us, and she very simply just said, "Is there any South African teams? How do I?" And we pointed in the direction of a couple of South African teams, and when she left, I realized in that moment that we had changed that young girl's life. Her
Mm.
life was changed. If you look back in your life and you wonder where those crossroads that you got to, where your life changed.
Yeah.
I still kick myself for never getting her contact details, maybe her Instagram or whatever. But I live in the hope that one day I will see this young girl on a front page of something, changing the world, because
Mm.
her life completely changed in that moment. And it was in that moment that I realized this this thing has the potential to do so much for South Africa. It has the potential to uplift. It has the potential to show people what is possible by the and it doesn't matter what your resources, it matters the power of your mind. And that's when and the bug bites you, and that bug, and then on top of, you see these kids. I don't say kids, I mean, I'm not, but you see these students, they burn the midnight oil. And just getting to the start line is an achievement. Every single team that gets to that start line has achieved an amazing thing.
Yeah.
To then go and drive 100 Ks, 5 Ks, 20 Ks, 1,000 Ks. It actually, at that point, I don't want to say it doesn't make a difference. It obviously does. But the main part of your achievement is getting to that start line. You've achieved amazing things. To me, we get to Cape Town and you see again, you've changed the lives of 400 kids. They will never,
Mm.
ever, ever forget that experience of crossing South Africa, driving a solar car on public roads over 7 days. And you know that you have fundamentally changed that person's outlook on life. Um, and with the international guys, you've shown them what Africa is really about. For the local guys, you've shown them that they can compete against the world. And you've given them a memory that they'll never forget. And
Mm.
it's a bug. You find people that have been in solar cars now for 20, 30 years, because it's just a rush watching these kids drive their cars, their heart, passion, soul. They go on an emotional roller coaster. I mean, I've seen grown men cry. I've seen children, I've seen guys break down who are so emotional. I've had more hugs and wet and champagne soaked hugs than I care to remember, when it's just the emotion comes flying. And it's
Mm.
just, it's you're making a real difference. And that, for me, is the bug. You as an organizer, you realize I've changed something. I've done something to contribute to the good of humanity. No matter how small, I've done something. And it's great. It's a lovely experience.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really incredible, and it's so cool to hear like how passionate you are, especially as an events organizer and as someone who is able to see the impact that they've put forward. It's really cool, and it's really inspiring to other people to say, if like I could also do things like that, and I can also change lives and change my own life. I think that shared impact and experience is also really cool.
Yeah, and it was really great because like this year, or I should say this year, last year we really stepped up our education program tremendously. So the event basically has two legs. So leg one is on the road. It's the challenge. It's the competition. It's the guys are competing against each other. And this year last year we had the closest Sasol Solar Challenge in history. To put it into perspective for people, the top two teams were separated on the finish by 38.3 kilometers. Now, it sounds like a lot. Considering they both covered more than 4,200 kilometers, it's less than 1%. It's less than 1% difference. Now, if you're talking Formula One, if Formula One was separated by less than 1% difference, you would have cars crossing the finish line almost exactly the same time. That is how close it was. So that's the one leg, and that leg is what that leg brings people in. It excites people. It gets that initial interest. People are like, wow, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
The other leg that is as big for us, and it's really, Sasol, again, I have to take my hats off to Sasol. They trust us, is the education component. So I mentioned earlier the thing about the control stops where we stop in towns. So what we do is we normally stop at schools. We find a school, we stop there, we set up control stop. And this time around, what we did is we set up like education stations. So we picked 3 subjects that we felt aligned with solar cars. So we set up a station around renewable energy. We set up a station around electric mobility, and we set up a station on robotics and programming. And we had the kids come down from the schools, all in the towns and everything, and they had an opportunity to come down and learn by doing. So they got the opportunity to build models. They were taught about, these subject matters, which, yes, I know their teachers teach them about, but I think people who maybe listen to your podcast, they don't understand what I mean by rural. Like when I say rural schools, like schools that, load shedding would be nice for them because they don't have electricity. That's some of the places we go to. And we invite schools, and these kids get an opportunity to see the foundations, because we don't have, I'm also very honest about it. We're not there for 4 days. I can't impart every aspect of renewable energy onto someone. But what I can do in half an hour is I can get you interested in it. I can ignite the spark where you say, oh, okay, that's interesting. So we had the kids, the students going, the scholars, I should say, they went to these 3 stations, and then they went to the solar car station where all the solar cars were parked up in between their laps. And what we did really differently this time around, which was a massive success, is that we mandated to the teams, we said, right, you have to have one person on your team who is a community engagement officer. The CEO for short, funny, but they were the CEO, community engagement officer, and they had to be involved. And they had to, so when kids came up to them in Middelburg or in Kirkwood or Neisner or, Bloem or wherever, and they said, they had to then explain to them what their project was about, what their car was about, the principles, have some sort of, interaction. And that worked phenomenally well, because you had these scholars that went to these 3 stations, and those 3 aspects manifest themselves into a solar car. It's obviously a culmination of much more technology than that, but at its base, a solar car is an electric vehicle because it has electric drive and it has a battery. It charges by the sun, so it's renewable energy, and it obviously there's a lot of robotics and programming that goes into this thing. So those kind of core principles then grow into a solar car. And just to see these scholars, how they understood the principles, and you had kids playing with little mini solar car kits, and they were going, and I was talking about earlier, that love of engineering, that passion. We had instances where we had some team members who were left behind because they were so busy talking to the school that the team was like, cool, the support vehicle will pick you up, we got to go. And they're just imparting knowledge. And this is guys from Belgium, from the Netherlands, from all around the world in South Africa, imparting knowledge about their love for solar cars. And you can see these kids have gone home and they've like, wow, this is an opportunity for me to like really have something different now. Like, this is so cool. And so that works really, really well. And we have those like two legs that the event stands on, that we try and always position that, yes, the event has to be challenging and we have to have roads that we can drive on and we have all these variables on this side. But along with that, equally as important is that we have to go to areas where we can actually touch people. There's a race that happens in Australia called the Bridgestone World Solar Challenge, and that's a flat sprint. They leave Darwin, and I was there, and I'm going to go there again this year. And they charge the outback. First one to get to Adelaide wins. Easy as that.
Mm.
And there's very few people that see those cars other than in Darwin or Adelaide. We have these two legs, and we say, right, well, here's the route that we want to do because it's challenging, but does it meet the requirement of the education? Are we going to go past schools? Are we going to stop in towns? Are we going to spread the message? Are we going to, spread the gospel of solar cars? Get kids involved in STEM, get them excited, and provided some like it meets those two criteria, then we move forward. And it's just for us, I believe firmly what we do makes this fundamental difference. I have alumni from the Sasol Solar Challenge who are working overseas in companies like Lightyear One. I know alumni from the Sasol Solar Challenge are working, in companies like Tesla, in all around the world, Formula E, doing great things in just renewable energy space.
Yeah.
And you talk to them and you hear the difference that this event made in their lives, and you're doing something great. It's just phenomenal. I just love it.
Yeah, no, that sounds absolutely incredible. And before I start, talking about some other stuff, I think people listening at this point might really want to get involved or be a part of this somehow. So how can people get involved with this event?
So the best way for them to get involved is just hit us up through the socials, so Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're SA Solar Challenge, or our website, which is solarchallenge.org.za. But if you just Google Sasol Solar Challenge, you're not going to miss it. We're everywhere. Our new info is going up for the 2024 event because we run every 2 years. So the info for that will go up in the next couple of weeks. But I would strongly encourage people, especially if you're at university, if you want to start a project at your university, get in touch with us. We have the materials, we have the resources, we have the knowledge. We will empower you to get out there and start a solar car project. Whether you're university or high school, don't stand back. Especially the students, we always find we have to find a champion at each institution, high school, wherever. Somebody has to drive it. Somebody has to be the leader. And the students, you talk about wanting to get involved. I don't think people understand what a benefit being part of an event like this does for you in terms of looking for a career afterwards. People in the space know these events. They see it on your CV and they know exactly what they're going to get. You become very much top of the pile when you go looking for a job one day. And some of the guys don't even have to go looking for jobs. There's a gentleman, and if I reach out to him, I must actually talk to him. He was the lead pilot for the Northwest University, and he was doing his postgrad studies, engineering. I think he was is majoring in electrical engineering, if I stand to be corrected. And he told me he had 3 job offers waiting for him when he finished.
Wow.
Great, ready to go. And it's because when he went for these interviews, I said, "Oh, tell us something interesting about yourself." He said, "Oh, I pilot a solar car." And interestingly, people are like, "Okay, hang on, this is cool. Like, let's talk." So to people wanting to get involved, I cannot encourage you enough. You don't have to build these world-beating spaceships that you see. Just get to the start line, get involved, become part of the community, and it sets you apart from your peers. So yeah, that's how they can get involved.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And on a more personal note, I think that would be really cool for me as well, because I'm kind of like in that space. I'm studying mechatronics at UCT, so it's definitely within my radar.
We've been hounding UCT to start a solar car team for years. So if you are interested, we'll get in touch and we can give you all the info, and let's get a team from UCT on the road.
Yeah, no, definitely. And
fantastic.
You've spoken a bit about the part of it being the electric vehicles thing, and from what I understand, one of the events that you guys also run is EMSA or
Hmm.
EMSA, the
Yep,
E-Mobility Congress of South Africa. So,
indeed.
from your experience with the Sasol Solar Challenge and with EMSA, I guess you have a pretty good understanding of electric vehicles and an appreciation of the concept. So, what role do you think electric vehicles have to play in South Africa and in Africa as a whole, especially considering the energy crisis that we currently face?
So, look, I don't think we have enough time to discuss this whole question on one podcast because it's a really complex question. Again, I don't call myself an expert, but I have been very privileged to talk to a lot of experts and some of the best minds in the country. I mentioned earlier Winston Jordan. He is pretty much the founder of electric vehicles in Southern Africa. His company Grid Cars is laying the electric highways. I think that what people don't understand is that we look at it and we say we're so used to internal combustion engines being the monopoly on energy that we expect the next technology to do the same thing. And I think what we're going to see to my if my kind of view is that electric. Look, I think people have a misconception. I need to say this very carefully. We don't actually have a choice anymore. Like
Yeah.
people think that there's an option. They think there's an option. There is no option. But in
Mm.
2030, the two biggest markets that we export cars to will stop importing internal combustion engines. Now,
Wow.
that is Europe, and we Europe takes, I think most of our export market goes to Europe. We are, as a country, if we lose that export market, you can kiss goodbye to 15% of our GDP. Goodbye. Now,
Sure.
it's a huge issue, and that's the direct GDP. That you're not talking about the fringe industries that's supporting our vehicle manufacturing. You're not talking about all those things. So if we don't make the transition, we're going to become fossils in a digital age,
Mm.
and literally overnight we will. Our manufacturing industry will cease to exist. Job losses will be through the roof. So we don't actually have a choice anymore. And this is where I think people don't understand is that, yes, it's 2023. Yes, you have 7 years, but 7 years to talk about a fundamental change in the mobility of mankind is a very short time.
Yeah.
Um, I where I think that South Africa is going to go, I think we'll end up with an energy mix of the different energies that are out there, just because of the landscape and the size of the country that we live in. I mean, it's great you hear somebody putting up 400 electric chargers in Italy. Well, Italy's the size of Gauteng. Like honestly,
Yeah.
let's not really, but you know what I'm saying.
Mm.
We have different problems here that we have to solve
Yeah.
with locally. I think that electric cars is going to, I don't want to say democratize the energy space, but the vehicle space. I think what we'll see is there'll be the first big movement will be mass transportation. So electrification of buses. I think minibus taxis is going to be a massive one. And that will happen. I don't want to say overnight, but it will happen really quickly because
Mm.
they are absolutely perfect audience for electric vehicles. You
Yeah.
ask a taxi driver will tell you exactly his route. He knows exactly the kilometers. He knows exactly how long it takes him. He is not playing games with that route. He knows.
Mm.
No, now for 4 or 5 hours of the day, they're parked up waiting for things to happen, and then the next lift cycle. If they
Mm.
could be parked, if they could be parked up under a charging station that's made of solar panels, well, you've solved a number of problems all at once.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a influx of, as we've seen at the moment, high-end electric vehicles on the road because that's where it comes in. Very shortly, we're going to start seeing the Korean manufacturers bring in some much more accessible vehicles. As far if my information is correct, in the next 6 months, we'll start to see much more accessible vehicles coming in from the Southeast Asia, India. I think we'll see some really accessible vehicles coming in.
Mm.
I do think there'll be a short period of hybrids being the thing, but hybrids they actually don't solve any problem because you don't have a big enough battery to get enough range, but you have all the extra weight of having a battery, so you don't get the benefits of internal combustion or of, it's a nice to have, and you're doing your bit, great, but I think that hybrids will be short lived.
Mm.
I do think what we'll see is a shift in this country to your local town car, because most families end up having two cars. You have a car that's your local short distance driver, and then you have something that you go on your long distance, drives with.
Mm.
So I think we'll see a shift where most people will have a electric vehicle that they do their daily drive, because most of us daily drive. If you're doing more than 200 k's in your daily drive, you are doing really well. Now, most electric vehicles coming out minimum distance 400 k, so you can get that car home. It's on 50% battery charge. You plug it in at your home charger, and the next morning, cars charged. Now, I know, and we don't say energy crisis. Let's call it what it is. It's called load shedding. Everyone always says to me, Rob, how can you want to buy an electric vehicle when you got load shedding? Well, actually, because two things. One, we're not going to wake up and there's suddenly going to be 10,000 electric vehicles on our roads tomorrow morning. So we need to appreciate that fact. So when people say, "Oh well, electric vehicles are gonna destabilize the grid even further," we're not going to wake up and all of a sudden everyone's buying electric vehicles. Like that's the first reality. Okay. The second reality is that if we have more electric vehicles, especially vehicles that are people movers on the roads, what we end up creating is we create vehicles that are charging during the low peak times, and we stabilize the national grid. So what happens with Eskom, and I'm not an energy expert, so people out there, please don't quote me on this, but what happens with Eskom is that you get peak demand periods and then they have to try and turn everything off. And then later in the evening, when everything turns off, then you get into low demand periods. And then they have to try and turn some of the generation units off. And then it's off and on the whole time.
Yeah.
Creates a very unstable grid. Now, all these cars have smart chargers. So everyone plugs in their car. If Eskom knew that there was going to be a stable demand for energy consistently, you could keep the generation units on all the time. Yes, if they run out of coal, it's a problem. Yes, I hear they break down, but they break down because they're being turned on and off the whole time.
Yeah.
If they could run them consistently so that at 11 o'clock at night, all the electric cars start pulling charge. So your house you're no longer making coffee and tea and whatever, your electric car is charging. If you then did that across the board with 500, 600, 1,000 cars, that pull on the grid would be, okay, cool. We can now keep these generation units going because the energy is still being used. So we're now creating grid stabilization. So that's the first benefit. Okay. Second benefit is that when you have companies such as Golden Arrow buses down in the Cape, who are electrifying their buses, what they end up doing is creating mini power stations. Because so here's the example. Let's say I have 100 let's say I have 100 minibus taxis. I want to charge my taxis. I know that Eskom's not a reliable venue. What I'm going to do, I'm going to build a warehouse. I'm going to stick a whole bunch of solar panels on the roof. I'm going to jam a whole bunch of batteries in there. Yes, it's going to cost me a bit of money, but during the day when my taxis are on the road and the grid has peak demand at the same time, I don't need that energy that I'm busy creating. So I can if I can now sell that energy back into the grid. So my factory becomes a mini energy generator.
Yeah.
So in my immediate area, maybe I'm only generating 100 megawatts or whatever it is. But I can now feed into my area because my taxis, my vehicles are out on the road. They're not taking charge. My batteries are full. So as long as my batteries are full, I'm good. Anything extra that I'm not using because I've got so many solar panels on my roof, I can now put back into the grid. So now we decentralize the energy in the country. And that's the problem. In South Africa at the moment, we have a centralized energy system.
Yeah.
If we decentralize and democratize energy production, suddenly everyone can produce 10, 15, 20, 100 megawatts. And we get to this point where, oh, wow, we're actually producing a lot of electricity now. That will happen because of electric vehicles, because the private sector and small entrepreneurs, and that's where the key one is, the small entrepreneurs. If I'm a small entrepreneur and I'm like, what kind of business do I get into? I don't have 10 million rand to do this. I don't, if I go and install renewable power charging points for electric vehicles at coffee shops and whatever, there's a big business. There's a business there, and mark my words, it's going to happen. Now, Bukanyo can come along in her i3. She plugs her i3 in to charge because she wants to go and have a coffee at Seattle Coffee. It only needs half an hour, but she knows she's going to be there for half an hour doing some studying, whatever. She gets in her i3. She pays for whatever she's charged. Great. That entrepreneur has now sold energy. He's in the energy business. If that charge point isn't being used for the rest of the day, that solar panel is still generating energy.
Yeah.
And the battery, because all those charge points, if they're renewable, they have to hold a battery because there has to be charge there. If that battery is full, then he can then on-sell that energy back into the supermarket or whatever. So now you're creating these mini electric generating units all around the countryside, and you decentralize the energy grid, which is the answer. That's, our president, bless his, that's what he's trying to say to everyone. We have to decentralize energy. Energy generation has to not just be one person's problem. Andre de Ruyter can't be the big bad monster. Everyone. If you've got lots of people doing this thing, then if one falls over, we're not so critical because you've got lots of different people involved in the space. So what does electric vehicles mean for South Africa? I think it's going to mean a high degree of mobility, especially for our kind of our middle and lower income sector. You're going to find electric bikes are going to be the thing. All these Checkers 60 guys zooming around everywhere. I would guarantee in the next 3 years, all those will be electric, because the cost of filling that thing with petrol versus going back to the Checkers depot, plugging it into charge. It's got a small battery. There's a whole bunch of solar panels on the roof, and they just charge it overnight. Next morning, you're riding for free. Makes sense.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you're gonna see that's gonna be the big one. Minibus taxis, buses. And then it will be like anything else. You'll see your high-end cars will come in, and then you'll see the lower-end cars, which will filter in eventually. I really hope we're trying to do a lot of work with EMSA, really trying to convince the OEMs and government to retool the production lines in South Africa to manufacture vehicles in SA. We have to get that right. It's critical for the country. It is absolutely critical that we convince the big brands to manufacture here. But it's a very competitive space. There's a lot of competition out there for that. So we have to get that right. But I do think that it's going to really, fundamentally shift what we know as mobility for people in South Africa. I think for the rest of Africa, I don't know. People say the rest of Africa. Kenya is ahead of South Africa when it comes to e-mobility. Kenya is hitting home runs every day and twice on Sundays. They are ahead of us when it comes to e-mobility. They are really the laws are ahead of us. The legal structures are ahead of us. They are ahead of us. A lot of African countries are ahead of the curve when it comes to electrification. I think what you're going to see is that unfortunately, a lot of African countries will get left behind, and what they'll become is the dumping ground for manufacturers who haven't made the shift, and they're just going to dump old stock on Africa. So you're going to get, either very unreliable things being shipped into Africa, which is unfortunate, or you're going to get, unscrupulous manufacturers just, riding internal combustion for as long as they can into Africa. But eventually, it will change everything, and I think, for me, the biggest change will be access to reliable energy, and energy access is the most critical thing for us to revolutionize or upskill a country. If people have access to energy and they know that they can go home, turn the light switch on, the lights will work, they can have a warm meal, they can have a computer. Energy access is the most critical thing to end poverty. Next to food and safety and whatever. If you talk to people, access to energy is right up there. It is so important. So I think that electric vehicles are going to push that envelope tremendously. but I do think, and I'm probably the most positive person when I spoke about this. And probably like you, my family say, "How the hell can you want to buy an electric car with load shedding?"
Mm,
I do think that the change curve in South Africa and Africa will not be like the rest of the world, where they've had a steady, nice little change curve. We're going to have a change curve that's going to be like this, and it's going to shoot up.
mm,
And you'll wake up one day, and electric vehicles will be the norm. And I think it's going to fundamentally change Africa, and I think it's going to bring Africa into I don't say the 21st century, but I do think we're going to see a tremendous shift because of electric vehicles. And my hope is that it spreads around some of the wealth of the world where it's should be, which is in Africa.
yeah. Wow, I think that there were some definitely incredible and really important points that you brought out. I think, just from some of the things you said, like you really broadened my like thinking around electric vehicles. I think normally when people think about them, you think about like Tesla and just like personal like sedans and stuff. Whereas the most likely first movers are going to be where you have like public transport systems or delivery services and stuff, because those are more like commercial and industrial and can be done on a larger scale and like don't rely on individuals. So I didn't really think about it like that before. So yeah, that's really cool. And just also the thing you mentioned about how Africa's jump to renewables is more likely to be exponential. It kind of reminded me of something that happened with technologies where like other countries went from I don't quite remember what it is, but they went from like something to computers to like cell phones in a sense, and then we just jumped straight to cell phones. So it's something similar to that.
It's exactly the same thing. They talk about the
Yeah.
communication revolution. The rest of the world went from landlines to this to that. In Africa, we just said, "Cool, cell phones." Um,
Yes.
it'll be the same thing. It's exactly the same thing in EVs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's just so much to take from there, and I think it's a really cool space with a lot of potential that I think we'll see in the near future.
Awesome, awesome. But I know you got a couple more questions, and our time is short. So let me not.
Yes,
I'm very passionate about the subject. I can talk for hours. So let me shut up and let you get on.
sure. Just a more personal question. You've mentioned in your Mail and Guardian's 200 list article that you shouldn't take failures so personally, and instead that you should learn and grow from them. So, what are some of the most like notable mistakes or failures that you've had in your career, and how did you manage to overcome them?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, I think um, failing's a part of running a business or doing your own thing. I've tripped and fallen many times. I think for me, it's probably not focusing on the failures. I've learned to focus on the really small people around me who I trust. My wife is incredibly supportive. Without her, I definitely wouldn't be here. She puts up with a lot of nonsense. So my advice would be, we're all going to fail. Everyone's going to trip. You're all going to dust yourself off. Is that tune out the noise? Tune out those people who is noise, who, and those who support you. Listen to them. I'm blessed. As I've mentioned, my wife is super supportive. I have a wonderful father who's now retired. They both bring me down to earth when I go, but like, hey, let's do this. And they're like, okay, just calm your shit down. Like, whoa, slow down.
Yeah,
So find those people. That's my advice: is find those people who will encourage you when you need to be encouraged. I've had times when I thought, I was going to have to close my book. And then like during COVID, I honest to God, I thought that was it. That was me. If it wasn't for my wife, I don't think I would have made it through. So find those people who support you, keep them close, but give them the respect they deserve by listening to them. If they tell you what you're doing is a bad idea, really look hard at what you're doing. And the second piece of advice is don't put off a decision that can be made today till tomorrow. I've learned time and time and time again is that when you're forced to make a decision, the hardest choice is usually the right choice. I've had to cancel events before, the day before events. I've had
Mm.
to cancel, things where people are busy doing an event. I've never regretted anything I've done because ultimately I've always placed the safety of participants or spectators above anything else.
Yeah.
But those decisions were very hard in the time to make, and I had to make the right decision. And the hard decision is always the right decision. The easier the decision is going to be, it's usually going to be the wrong one.
Mm.
So that those, firstly, find your tribe, find the people around you, whether it's your parents or a mentor. I was lucky; my father was my mentor. Um, Find a mentor and trust those that you love to support you because you're going to need it. I had said to someone the other day, I said, "Oh, you're self-made," and I said, "I think that's the biggest load of bullshit in the world.
Mm.
There's no person in this world who's a self-made whatever, because you don't do it on your own.
Yeah.
You cannot do it on your own. So find those people, keep them close, listen to them. When you're forced with hard decisions, make the hard decisions, make them firm, make them hard, make them fast, and get on with it. Um, and and I suppose the final one is, if you really believe in your gut and what you're doing is right, and if you can look yourself honestly in the mirror and say what I'm doing is right, then back yourself. Um, if you can look in the mirror and you can say, I believe 100% in what I'm doing is right. I know what I'm doing is right. I'm not, and when no one else is around, when the person in the mirror looks back at you, if you can still believe that what you're doing is right, then go for it.
Mm.
No one can stop you. So those are my three things of advice. Let's not, we all fail. Find the circle, keep them close, make the hard decisions, make them hard, get on with them. And then, when it's all quiet and all said and done, if you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm still doing the right thing. And if your gut tells you, then you're fine. That would be my three kind of key things.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely some incredible advice to live by.
Thank you very much.
So just to this kind of reiterates on what I asked before, but just to as we come towards the end, how can people find you? How can people find your work and support you? And
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of solar cars, so we have a couple of different solar car events that we run in South Africa. We have a development one called the Alanga Cup, which happens every year up here in Joburg. But look, find me on Instagram. I don't really post much work on Instagram. I keep it kind of personal, but on LinkedIn, I do a lot of work stuff. So if you're on LinkedIn, search for me, Rob Walker. I'm the edit with lots of solar cars and my stuff. You cannot miss me. Find me on there. If you connect me on there, I'll 9 times out of 10 I'll answer you. Also, just search us. Sasol Solar Challenge. It links up. We don't really talk too much about our company. Our company is more of a vehicle to drive our events. But yeah, just Google. I cannot tell people enough. And I think it's a resource that people are vastly underutilized is Google. Just Google. You jump on Google right now and you search solar cars South Africa. My name will pop up there.
mm,
Get in touch with us. If you want to start a team, we have a whole support network. We have documentation. We have all the resources. We'll get you going. If there's people who have companies out there who want to support us, get in touch. We're always looking for sponsors. As great, you wouldn't believe this. As great as the work is what we're doing, as generous as Sasol is for us, we're always looking for sponsors. We were very
yeah.
blessed last year. We had a good batch of sponsors, got us through. But if people want to get involved, get in touch with us. We have sponsorship opportunities from very, very low level to very high level. Know that your money is going towards a good cause. We are really shaping the hearts and minds of South Africans. And yeah, just get in touch. And if anything, just follow us. If the Sasol Solar Challenge is coming to your town and close to you in 2024, come out and see it. We'll go watch the videos on YouTube. Go, just start. I don't even care if people don't want to support me. I mean, like some people, maybe they don't want to support me. But if you have an interest, just pick up a phone, a laptop, a whatever, and just Google solar cars and just explore. it is a mind-bending world that's out there. We come from in the late 80s when the first solar car race was started in Australia to where we are now. It's phenomenal. If you have even the smallest amount of interest in the subject, just go and Google. I guarantee you, whatever you think you know is a drop in the bucket. The things I've seen on solar cars would make people's eyes roll on the back of their heads. The technology is next level, and it's not always technology coming from overseas. I want to say this again. What I have seen some of our South African teams do is world beating. It is better than what the Americans, Europeans, Chinese, Japanese, Australians, whatever. There is some seriously impressive stuff out there from South Africa. We just have to get on it. We just have to support the teams. The teams need financial backing. They need to be able to support, to compete at the highest level, and just start a team. You were saying yourself, you're from UCT. Tomorrow, I guarantee you Electra knows about it. I absolutely guarantee you. If you walk into your Electra tomorrow and say, hey, I'm in the engineering faculty, I want to start a solar car, they will know about the Sasol Solar Challenge. Absolutely guaranteed. And just get going. Just start. You've got 2 years now. We'll give you a guide how to build your first solar car. We'll invite, come and we'll introduce you to people in your area who built solar cars, give you a network of people to chat to. I think often people are scared of it. They look at this and they're like, oh, it's such a big project. I could never do this. And then they just stop. My only suggestion is just start. Sketch out a design and just start. And once you've started, the rest will follow. It's as simple as that.
Incredible. And yeah, I think that's definitely some advice that our listeners will heed and that I will definitely take forward. So thank you for that.
Absolute pleasure.
And so my last question for you is, if you knew that every young African was listening to this episode right now, what would you want to say to them?
I think it's such a meaningful question, and I'm a very proud African. I consider myself African. I'm born in South Africa. I think if I could talk to every young African, I would just tell them to believe in themselves. I think that Africa is a sleeping giant, as a superpower. I think what holds us back is as a continent and as a people, we don't believe in ourselves. We look at what the Americans are doing and we say, oh, we wish we could do that. Or we look at what the Europeans are doing. Oh, we wish we could do that. Or we're so busy looking elsewhere that we don't believe we can do it. And when you scratch the surface and you realize how many people who are from Africa and South Africa, to be honest, who are out there changing the world, we just need some of those people to stay here, believe that they can do it, and just believe. It's that, and I know it's difficult, and I know, South Africa and Africa, we have problems the rest of the world can't even fathom on how to deal with. And I had international guest outs a few weeks ago, and they couldn't understand what the hell load shedding was. They just boggled their mind. How the hell can your country not produce enough electricity? Long story. But if we had more people that believed that we could fix these problems, and less people, I don't want to say bitching and moaning about it, but we would have fixed the thing by now. And unfortunately, it's not going to come from, with respect, the older generation, the guys who are 50 plus and stuff. They're still limited by what they can imagine. It's going to come from people like yourself who believe, who can imagine solutions that are so crazy that they could actually just work. And we have to have that belief. We have to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I believe I can do this. I believe as an African, I believe as a proud South African, I can do this. I can change the world. I can do whatever needs to be done. And that's, that would be my message. Honestly, if I could talk to every young African, I'd say, just believe in yourself.
Wow, thank you. And what an incredible way to end off. Really, really interesting and inspiring message. Thank you so much, Robert, for taking the time to chat with me today. It was really, really cool to engage with you and to hear about the projects that you're involved with. So thank you.
No, absolute pleasure, Bukanya. Thank you very much for having me on, and I wish you the very best for your podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing a UCT solar car team come out. I'm going to hold you to that because I know you're Dean of Engineering. So I'm going to pop her an email and say, Bukanya said, done.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Perfect. Good luck, and thank you very much for having me on.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that it brought you tremendous value. If it did, please leave a rating for the podcast on whatever platform you use. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and follow us on social media at For the Future ZA. I would love to hear your thoughts on the podcast episode. Thank you so much and have a good one.